when the honeymoon is over, and you settle down into everyday living, like for the addict, alcoholic addict, or eating disorder person, or anyone with any addiction. If you're a family member and you're addicted to your addict, that's addiction. When we focus more on the addict than on ourselves, that's an addiction. So a lot of times these talks cover just about everyone. But I'm going to talk specifically about how people with addictions they can get in recovery, and they a lot of times they get in recovery by going to meetings. Someone encourages them to go to a meeting, or they know about meetings and they go to a meeting. in AA and NA both, in OA, I mean, we celebrate the newcomers. We cheer for them. We're excited that they're there, and we are very welcoming, hoping that, they will come back, And if you're in a group that's not welcoming to newcomers, you might want to think about that, because that's what we do in 12-step programs. We welcome newcomers and we cheer them on, and then they start, they come back and they start getting chips. AA, the reason they started giving chips years ago is people were relapsing in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, 9 months, a year. They were relapsing. And so that little chip that we get at meetings, that doesn't keep us clean and sober and abstinent, but it helps. It helps when you know that you've got 29 days and you're going to a meeting tomorrow, and if you were to drink or use, you wouldn't get that chip. And so it's about celebrating sobriety, celebrating abstinence. And it's a lot to celebrate. And in early recovery, that's what early recovery, that first 2 years. Now the second year is usually the honeymoon's over, but that first year, it's usually, and I'm not saying it's easy for any addict that first year, but they are honored at meetings. They are usually surrounded by love, and they start getting the chips, and it's recommended that they get a sponsor, and most sponsors will say, I'll see you here tonight, and they recommend you go to a meeting every day, at least one meeting, because recovery is about change. We change playmates, playpens, playthings. It's about changing everything in our lives. It's not just about changing, using a substance. As hard as that is, that's easy. That's the easy part. To lay down the bottle or the pills or the food. As hard as that is, that's the easy part. The hard part is doing it every day, day in and day out, day in and day out. My little old husband, bless his heart, and I didn't need him to feel sorry for me, but he would just feel so sorry for me. He said, with him, with his alcoholism, he knew one drink and he would be gone, gone again. And he said, I don't know how you do it. You eat every day, and that's how you stay in recovery. But how do you do it? How do you do it? And I just love that he felt sorry for me. But what he didn't know was I quit abusing food in the way I was abusing food. I started eating like so-called normal people. In fact, I'd watch him eat. And when he felt that he had enough food, I don't care what was on his plate, he'd take his napkin and cover it up. He was done. And then, I'd clean off the table, move the napkin, and eat his leftovers. But anyway, it's it's really hard at first. Uh, but what I was going to say, he would feel sorry for me. And no one needs to feel sorry for an addict. Do not. That is the worst thing to do for us, is to feel sorry for us. We bless our hearts enough. We do not need you blessing our hearts for us. Bless your heart. I feel so sorry for you. Don't do that to an addict. We eat it up, I mean, I never got a whole lot of that, but I sure gave it to the addicts in my life. Almost killed 3 perfectly good addicts. My mother, my husband, and my daughter, until I got really grounded in Al-Anon and learned what I was doing. And I'm going to talk about that next time I talk. I'm going to talk about how the family's affected by any addiction. Okay, so right at first, you're going to meetings every night. You get chips on a regular basis, 30 days, 60 days. You look forward to that. The family gets hopeful. They start trusting you a little bit more. You start keeping your word to them. Everything is new. Everybody's excited. Oh, look what they're doing. And then one day, you wake up on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, or Thursday, and you think, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of this. And nothing's really wrong, but nothing's exciting anymore. And nothing's new. I mean, you go to those meetings, you see the same people there, you see, and so routine sets in. And that's dangerous for a newcomer, because what they like is that excitement and that attention of being new. And then when they quit being new and they're just one among the many, it's kind of a dangerous place for them to get, because then what they're going to have to do if they stay clean and sober is get excited about recovery and make recovery a part of your life. It's not your life here and recovery over there. It is in every fabric of your being. Recovery is. It becomes as natural, it needs to become as natural as brushing your teeth of a morning. If at night, maybe at noon, it's routine. You do it because it's good for you. And it's like paying bills. It's like getting up and going to work. It's like you do something that that maybe you spout it off at a fellow worker at work or something. And if you're in sobriety, you make amends quickly, because someone is taking you through the steps and they're teaching you about step 10. Step 10 is when any of us do something outside. I mean, we know when we've stepped over the threshold of, into when we need to make amends. And that's what step 10 does. We do an inventory and we say, my gosh, I need to go make amends to that person. You go back the next day and make amends for whatever you did. And they might have done more to you than you did to them. It doesn't matter. They're not trying to stay clean and sober. You are, So it's about, making amends or apologizing when you get out of order or do something. And then sobriety is about showing up. Now, when I'm saying this, it's like I'm kind of talking out of both sides of my mouth. I am 83 years old. I can do a lot, but I can't do what I used to do. I cannot do it physically. And besides that, I don't drive, and that's a limitation. And back in those days, I was a human doer, not a human being. And I became a human doer when I got into Al-Anon. I was helping everybody because it helped me and I wanted to help others. And then OA, I became a spokesperson, and OA doesn't need spokespeople, but I became a spokesperson. I carried the message. And I didn't only carry the message, sometimes I carried the person. And what that means, when you start trying to carry an alcoholic. Jeff knows what I'm talking about. When you try to do more for their sobriety than they're doing, you're carrying that alcoholic. And that means you need to go on down the road to help somebody else. Otherwise, it can turn into codependency. And alcoholics and addicts and people with eating disorders, the disease is a self-centered disease. Do y'all know that? It's self-centered. I mean, when we're into any kind of a disease, we're into ourselves. We're not thinking about our kids or our husbands or anybody. We're thinking about that next fix that we're going to get, whether it's food, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, or whatever. So having long-term recovery means learning to just show up. And, like in meetings, like when you're going to meetings, like I was saying, at 83, I don't do as much as I used to. I mean, I used to have my finger and everything at the open door, and any convention or conference that they were having or anything, I was there to help. And I do not regret 1 minute of it. It helped me stay sane. I can't do those things today because I hate to tell you, but I'm getting old, but don't tell anybody. Let's keep that a secret. I just can't do what I used to do. I can't. So, but, and then another thing, how you get long-term recovery is you start loving difficult people. It's easy to love the lovable. The Bible tells us about that. There is no chore to love the lovable. What's a chore is to love the unlovable. And when you're going to meetings of any kind, you're going to run into some unlovable people. Love them anyway, because loving them is not for them, it's for you. It's getting out of yourself long enough because that's what the disease is. It's a self-centered disease. It is, if you want to know where the disease is, you look down at your navel. Just everybody look down at your navel. And right here is where the disease is inside ourselves. We are our problem. If you're an addict of any kind, you've got a streak of self-centeredness. That's the main part of, do you addicts agree? If you agree, shake your head. I mean, we are self-centered people. I want what I want when I want it, and I want it this way. Do it my way. My way is best. And I will tell you, Al-Anon's, an untreated Al-Anon, an untreated family member can do the same thing. They can show up the absolute same way. Now, the only difference is, unless they are an addict themselves, they don't have anything to take the edge off. They don't have anything to go back to relapse for, the food, the alcohol, the drugs. They just have cold turkey. So, loving difficult people. So, we're all going to find difficult people. I mean, you probably don't have to look around too far to see. Maybe there's a few difficult people in your family. Maybe there's some difficult people that you work with, and then you are going to find difficult people in a 12-step program. Go anyway. Go anyway. I could list you off the old timers. I started going to the open door 15 years before my husband ever went to his first AA meeting. I'd go to open AA meetings. I'd go to Al-Anon. I went to a meeting, 2 meetings a day. I had to because I was sick. I had, focused on helping alcoholics until that's all I knew. That was what my life was about, was helping others, particularly those who didn't want any help. I loved a challenge. I picked people who didn't want what I had, because then I was going to give it to them whether they wanted it or not. Okay, So if you can do your sobriety, your recovery, it's like routine. And when I worked at the Serenity House, there was that First Baptist Church down the street, and they had this Family Life Center that had every kind of gym equipment. They had a walking trail. They had spas. They had everything, and they were very generous to our clients and let me take them over there. So I was over there one day, and the guy that worked on the front desk was a paraplegic. He had been in Vietnam War, and he was in a wheelchair. And so we were just shooting the breeze, and he said, well, I see these people, and because they come over here, and I get kind of acquainted with them, and then I see them graduate out of the program, and they leave, and then a month, 2 months, they're back. And then they're back again. And then they're back again. He said, what is it? Why do they not get it, And I said, because it's not just the use absolutely of any drug or alcohol or whatever substance. It does have to stop if you're going to recovery. But if you don't do other things, you're just a dry alcoholic. And I'd rather live around a practicing alcoholic than a dry alcoholic, because they're hateful, they're irritable, restless, and discontented, and they don't have anything to take the edge off. So the thing about it is, he was asking me, he said, well, what do they do to recover? How do you recover? I said, it's very simple. 5 things. You get up in the morning and you invite God into your day and ask Him for another day of sobriety, another day of abstinence from the food, drugs, alcohol. Ask Him for another day of recovery, and then you don't use. You go through that one day. That's all any of us have, is that one day. You go through that day and you don't use. So that's number 1. And then the second thing is to read some kind of program literature, do some form of meditation. Get you a little meditation book, or read page 86, 87 out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Read some, if you go to church, read your, read your Sunday school lesson. Study the scriptures, read some kind of uplifting material, and include AA and NA and OA. And then the next thing is go to meetings. Get with like kind. Get out there, continue to go. The old timers are the ones that you're going to see in the program that keep coming back. Keep coming back. Keep coming back. And they keep the home fires burning. They're the backbone of those meetings. So go to meetings. Another thing, go to meetings. Another thing is get a sponsor. Get a sponsor and work the 12 steps. Without the 12 steps, you're going to a social club. When you go to AA, OA, NA, Al-Anon, and you don't work the program, you're socializing. And, you'll get a little bit out of it just by listening to other people, but you don't have anything to give them. You don't have a thing to give them. You're taking, and that's early sobriety. You do have to take. But after a while, if we're going to stay clean and sober long term, we must start giving back. And one of the things is get a sponsor early on and work the steps. I love taking people through the steps. That's probably one of my favorite things, is taking people through the steps and not getting paid for it. I work in the field, I work in the business, but my recovery work is for free and for fun and for my sanity. I love taking a woman through the steps now. I'm learning far more than she is. They have added stuff in that big book that I've never read before, and I've read it over and over and over. But work the steps with another person. This is not a help yourself program. Work the steps with another person. And then the 5th thing is give it away. Start sponsoring people. give it away, go to meetings, make coffee, clean up afterwards, do some kind of service work. Long-term recovery is about getting out of ourselves. When we stay all wrapped up in ourselves, we make a very poor package. So recovery is about getting out of ourselves and helping others. And it all doesn't have to be in 12-step programs. Community work, get out in your community and find things to do. Long-term recovering people do. They get back into life. Or maybe they've never been in life. Maybe they've never been in the community or in a church where they gave, and it's about, getting out of your house and getting out in the community and giving away what was freely given to you. Okay, so the thing about is, if we get complacent, complacency is a killer. Complacency is, I am too tired to go to meetings. I just see the same old people. I hear the same old things. I just don't want to go. And she's going to say the same thing she's been saying for 15 years and nothing changes. Or he's going to be mad at his wife, whatever, Complacency. We get to where we don't want to show up. And then next thing we know, we quit calling our sponsor. Well, I've worked the steps. Why do I need to call a sponsor now? We quit connecting. We quit calling our sponsor. The next thing, we quit praying. Now it's getting bad. It's getting bad when you quit praying. And then we quit doing our morning readings. And then we quit helping other people. We quit getting out of ourselves. By that time, we're crawling back into ourselves. We're crawling back into the problem. We are the problem. If you want to know what your problem is, go look in the mirror. You are your own problem. We are our problem. And then we quit listening to other people. If you're an old timer and you've been around a long time, we get to thinking we know something. And the minute we think we know something, we're in trouble. We've got to be open to learning. And we've got to be open to listening. But the basic truth of recovery is basic. It's God, ourselves, and others. If we don't put ourselves under God, God, ourselves, and then others, we don't have anything to give others. If we don't start taking care of ourselves, there will be no long-term recovery. What people do is they quit taking care of maybe they're clean and sober, but if they don't get to really digging out the inside, what they'll do is switch over to another addiction. You go to AA meetings, you can see, not everyone, but I have seen them come in normal size, get clean and sober, and in a year, 100 pounds overweight. That happens because they switch addictions. Addiction is addiction is addiction. And then we start believing our own press. We start believing how wonderful we are. And the minute we start thinking that and thinking, oh, well, look at me, I am sober this many years, I'm clean, and don't ever believe your own press. Because at the end of the day, what we are, we're all addicts needing recovery just for today. Okay, so long-term recovery requires goals. An early recovery goal is I don't want to die. That's the goal in early recovery. I don't want to die. Because if you continue on the path that you're on of using, this disease will kill you. It may not kill you right off. It's a disease sometimes it won't let you live, but it won't let you die. And you just linger and have a miserable life still using. So, early recovery goal is, well, I don't want to die. And so later goals are, and this is kind of in the middle, is I want peace. When you decide that you'd rather have peace than chaos, because a lot of times people get clean and sober And if the family doesn't join them in recovery, that's when the chaos at home really gets stirred up, because the spouse will say something like, well, you were never here before because you were out drinking. And now you're not here now because you're all at those other drunks down there at those meetings. I never get to see you. And so the family gets irritable, restless, and discontented. They need their own help. They need Al-Anon family group. I still get amazed at therapists. I get amazed at them, first off, if they don't recommend AA to an alcoholic. I think they need to be sued for malpractice, but that's just me. They need to be recommended for a 12-step program. They cannot get it sitting in a therapist's office all the time. You know, the big book tells us some of us need more professional help, but they're not going to get sobriety sitting in a therapist's office. But to get with like kind, get with other people that have the same disease that you have. And then, so that second level of recovery is I want peace. I want peace of mind. I want healthy relationships. Healthy relationships do not just happen. You have to do your part. And through those 12 steps, there is a 9th step. That's the amend step. You get to go back and make amends to people that you've made, that you have harmed. Sometimes those relationships are mended, and sometimes they're never mended. But you've done your part. But you seek healthy relationships. And I always say this, Robert Kennedy said, when a person dies, if they have 2 to 3, up to 5 people in their lives that know everything about them and love them anyway, that when they die a rich person. We don't have to have the masses around us just, at our feet worshiping us. Or we need 2 or 3 people in our corner, and we need to be in their corner. That's what friendship is. It's a do or die. I mean, you're there for that person. And we can't be there for everyone in the world. We can in some ways. We can pray for anyone. But a real true friend is someone that, boy, you can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're going to pick up that phone or whatever, So relationships, mended, healthy relationships is what recovery is. And then another thing is find a purpose. Find a purpose. And it won't take you long to find a purpose. And, it doesn't all have to be in 12-step programs. There's a lot of things in most communities that people are begging for help, for volunteers. Get out in the community and volunteer. And then another thing is learn to enjoy life. And then, I don't care how old you are, if you start in early recovery building this platform, and what you will know is and say, I want my grandchildren to have a healthy me. But you can't wait until you're old to do it. When you get into sobriety is much more than crisis living, and we stop living from crisis to crisis. Some people unknowingly create drama because drama feels familiar. I'll tell you, I lived in drama. I lived in it, and I thought that's how you lived. And then I married a man that was the calmest man in the world. I wanted to just slap him sometimes. He was so calm. And I would try to create a chaos. I worked hard at it because that's what was familiar. Lust, fuss, and fight, and throw things, and run off, and threaten to divorce, and, I thought that's what life, let's cut somebody's throat, let's do this, he wasn't going to be any part of that. He was calm. Now, he was a drunk, but he was a calm drunk, and he did have 32 years of sobriety when he passed away. So, we don't have to learn to live from crisis to crisis. Find life in the moment, That is what long-term recovery is. And when you feel peace inside yourself, peace with yourself, peace with God, peace with others, what you're going to feel is very loving. Now, sometimes in early recovery, peace feels boring, doesn't it? He's my friend Bradley is shaking his head in jail. Peace, oh peace, that's just what I want. Early in recovery, addicts love things, got to stir it up, and so it feels kind of boring. So that's why we create a crisis until we heal. You can tell when you're into healing because that's when you don't seek crazy. You don't seek the crazies. You don't create the crazies. And, and then emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety is part of long-term recovery. I'll tell you, emotional sobriety is one of the hardest, I think, to achieve. I've mentioned this several times, but Bill, 16 years sober. 16 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, going to a meeting every day, working with others. 16 years sober, the depression nearly got him and he wanted to kill himself. Bill suffered from anxiety and depression all his life, but 16 years sober, he wanted to kill himself. And that's when he wrote this letter on depression. And this is what happens to people midway. And I've seen it happen many, and been around the block a lot, and I've seen people 15, 16, 17, 20 years of sobriety or recovery and be so miserable with depression and anxiety. They forget that the steps will work for any area of our life that we're willing to work. Now, I will tell you, addicts, and not all addicts, but a lot of addicts have brain chemistry that have some mental disorder. Isn't that surprising? That there's not every addict has this, but you can't get them diagnosed even until at least a year, usually 2 years of recovery, good, solid recovery, before you can really get them really good diagnosed. Is it depression coming from the alcoholism, or is it brain chemistry? And a lot of your alcoholics suffer from depression and anxiety. And that needs to be treated. That needs to be treated by professionals, because if an addict lives in depression and anxiety and are staying sober, it gets so bad after a while, that's when they relapse. They know what will help that depression and anxiety. And that's why it needs to be really, we recover mentally, physically, and the solution is spiritual. But so in recovery, for people with long-term recovery, I've had them 20 years sober have nervous breakdowns. I've had them wind up in the mental ward at Hendricks Hospital, 15 years sober. They didn't want to drink, but they were going nuts. They were going crazy. And it was from depression and anxiety. Now, in the early days, I run around with some hardcore people that didn't believe in any kind of medication, but we used to not have the medication that we have today. Now I'm not telling every alcoholic and every addict they need to go to your doctor and get medication. I'm not saying that. Some need medication. That is about, and I used to be stupid in a lot of ways. When Prozac first came out, I'd go around saying, well, I don't know of anyone that has a Prozac deficiency. Well, guess what? They did. It's about brain chemistry. When in long-term recovery, when an addict gets to be irritable, restless, and discontented, there may be more going on than the alcoholism. They're clean and sober. They're clean, they're not too sober. And this is when mental illness can trick in, and it's been there all along, but it will increase like it did with Bill, 16 years sober, he wanted to kill himself. So you're in good company if that happens to you. Okay, so this is what long-term recovery looks like, is if you can forgive, can you forgive others? That's what long-term recovery looks like. Because if you can't forgive people who have wronged you, and you carry that stuff around with you, that's pre-relapse. That is pre-relapse. And then you get to thinking, well, they did more to me than I did to them. If they hadn't done so and so, I wouldn't have done that. It doesn't matter. You're going to have to protect your sobriety at all costs if you want long-term sobriety. I don't care what they've done to you. It does not matter what they have done. They need to work on themselves. What matters is how you let it affect you. And that is where you're a jump ahead of normies. You've got a 12-step program. You've got a sponsor to go to. And they will walk you through every one of these crises. But they won't if you hide out and don't call them. Get with a sponsor, and they may even recommend, I think you need to go see you a good therapist. I think you might need to go to Shades of Hope and do an intensive. They may say things like that, because everyone carries around unresolved not everyone, but majority. And people in mental sobriety, if they don't deal with those things that are deep inside of them, that early childhood trauma that's left over from the past, if they don't deal with it in sobriety, they will use again. And it may not be that particular substance, but they'll find something to use to ease the pain of living. This is not anything to mess around with. If you're going to have long-term sobriety, one of the things you've got to be willing to do is receive correction, is to be willing to listen. I'll tell you, how dare her? I had a sponsor. I'm going to tell on myself. I was asking her, I said, well, what do you see? It was a loaded question. I said, well, what do you see that I need to work on? And she knew me. She knew not to go there. And I kept bugging her about it. And she said, well, one thing is I see you being in a lot of, I can't even remember the word I was going to say. Anyway, about putting things off, procrastination. She said, you might want to look at procrastination. Well, I wanted to slap her. I mean, me, a procrastinator? And she said, well, sometimes I noticed that you run a little late. Well, then I sure did want to slap her, And she said, that's procrastination. And my husband would always tell me that. He said, on Sunday morning, you try to do too many things before we walk out the door. I'd be up for 5 o'clock getting those 6 kids ready while he's laying in the bed asleep. He'd gradually get up, get dressed, tie that tie, pick up his Bible and say, anybody going with me? They better come on. And here I've been working my guts out, trying to get dinner, lunch fixed for all that, and I'd be half ready. So anyway, find somebody that will tell you the truth, like she told me, you're a procrastinator. And admit when you're wrong. And then another thing, if you want to live in long-term sobriety, learn to say no. When things are not right for you to do, just say no. Just, no, I'm not going to do that. Because a lot of times people get sober and they feel like that they need to bow down to people and make up for all those years that they wasn't there. No, you don't. You just pick up in the present. You don't have to make up for. A cancer patient, I don't think ever, I mean, I don't know, I've never had cancer, haven't been around many, but I don't think cancer patients sit around thinking what they could do for their family to make up for the time that they were sick. Alcoholics, drug addicts do that. You don't have to make up for that time. You don't. You were sick. This is a disease. It's not it's not just a problem. Addictions are diseases. And okay, so another thing is, I'm going to get through here in a minute, is to admit when you're wrong, when you're in some kind of a conflict with people. If you're wrong, just admit it. Don't hang in till hell freezes over. Just say, okay, I need to say this. You are absolutely right. You are right about that. And admit when you're wrong. Don't let pride keep you from being honest. Another thing is celebrate someone else's success. If you're in middle or if you want long-term sobriety, keep showing up at meetings and celebrate those newcomers like you were celebrated. That's what long-term sobriety looks like, is celebrating newcomers. Encourage you, that encourages them to come back. Celebrate your family. Thank them for being there with you. And learn to be lonely without being self-destructing. You're not going to be with people every minute of every day. And a lot of addicts cannot be by themselves. Do y'all know that? Now, there's some that want to be by themselves all the time. We are people of extremes, and they usually marry each other. They'll have someone that wants to be with somebody all the time, and they'll marry someone that's a loner, So, if you want long-term recovery, learn to be lonely sometimes without being self-destructive. Just spend time with yourself sometime, because what you're going to find out in sobriety, you're a pretty nice person. You're getting nicer along the way. You're finding new ways to live. And sit with uncomfortable emotions. This is the thing about addicts of any kind. They don't like, we don't like any kind of emotion. Nothing. We just kind of a straight line here. And life's not like that. Life is little highs, or real high highs and real low lows. That's what you need to avoid. We need to enjoy, the little highs, and then you can handle the little lows, because you're going to have low times. And that's why people who have long-term sobriety have learned to deal with those low times. You know what they do, or what we do? I don't do as much as I used to, but if I would get depressed, I would get myself dressed as I would get myself to a meeting. If you're depressed, go sit in a meeting. Go to a meeting. Get one on Zoom. They're right at our fingertips. Get with like kind. Okay, recovery has seasons. We have very young recovery where everybody's celebrating you. They're just thrilled that you're sober, and your boss is thrilled that you're showing up at work, and your wife or your husband is excited. Your kids are excited because you're coming to their ball games. And then there's middle recovery. Middle recovery is where you kind of get settled in, and you're learning to live the life of sobriety and take those highs and those lows. And then there's mature recovery. Mature recovery is, I always think, when I think of mature recovery, I think about my friend Barney. He was, we called him the happy drunk. Barney was happy all of the time, and I've told this story on here. He also worked for the Council on Alcoholism, but he did his recovery work outside of his professional work. I mean, he would talk to a drunk anytime. So one night, it was 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Him and his wife were asleep in the bed. The phone rang. Barney answered the phone, and he talked and he talked and he talked and he talked. And when he hung up, his wife said, well, who was that? Was that one of your sponsorees? And he said, oh no, he had the wrong number. He had the wrong number, and Barney talked to him anyway. Talked to him, and come to find out the guy was a drunk, and so he gave him his spiel about his own sobriety, you know. So that's what mature recovery is. You take time for other people. You just sort of settle in. You don't settle. You just sort of, you mature into recovery. We've got a gentleman on here, and I'm going to embarrass him because he's the only gentleman on this screen. I consider Jeff in mature recovery. You know, do you consider yourself in mature recovery? And what Jeff does, and I'm going to tell on him, what Jeff does, he does not keep it all to himself. He doesn't just keep it all right in here. He gives it away all of the time for free and for fun. That's why he is still sober. My friend Bradley that was on here, that's the same thing. That's what long-term recovery is. That's what mature recovery is. Get out of yourself. My friend Vicky up there and Rebecca, that's what long-term recovery is. We get out of ourselves. And a lot of you on this screen, TJ, not BJ, TJ. Because I know what y'all are doing is you give away what was freely given to you. I know people that you sponsor. You work with others. You know, you take calls. Now, you don't do it in a codependent way. You do it in balance. That's what it is. You have to do it in balance. And each season requires something different. Long-term recovery requires something different. That's when you get to go on cruises. That's when you get to travel. That's when you get to have fun. That's when you get to, you know, not have to show up at everything. You know, you get to go and have some, but you better show up enough to stay clean and sober and abstinent, you know. But you get to learn to live life. And one of the things, and how you stay in long-term recovery is to stay teachable. The minute we think we know everything, we're headed for relapse. When we think we know it all, we don't. We're in trouble. The day you think you've arrived, you haven't. So become the person that someone else needs. We all need to be needed. Become that person. Now, I don't mean give your life away. I mean, it's about balance, having a balance. It's instead of asking, you know, what am I getting out of this? Ask yourself is, who am I becoming? Who am I becoming? Who are you becoming? And then the last thing is finding joy again. Finding joy, and I hope you found joy before you get into really long-term recovery. And what it is you find something to have fun with. Find you a friend that laughs. You know, I've got me a dear friend sitting over here in this chair, and we act like teenagers together. Now, she looks like one, I don't, but I mean, we find a lot to laugh about. Laughter is healing. Find a hobby, go on vacations, and it doesn't have to be expensive vacations. Go out to the state park, camp out there. Enjoy your grandchildren. Serve in your community, serve in AA, the program. Find something to laugh about every day. Another thing that is good, and I'm not doing it as much this year, and I'm going to get back out there, and that's gardening. If you want to stay clean and sober, get out in your garden, grow something, tend to something. Learn to be a better cook. to use cooking. Now, a lot of you have an eating disorder, but you can cook wonderful dishes that are healthy. And then learn to enjoy music. I was talking to someone the other day, and he loves music, and he doesn't do much around his own home. And I said, well, why don't you, play your instruments around the house? He said, because no one asked me about my music. And I said, well, that's self-centered. You're waiting for them to ask you. You play your music for you. You practice that violin for you. You play those drums for you. It doesn't matter if they enjoy it. You play it for you. Get somewhere where you're not bothering, someone else, and play your music. Don't wait around for someone to ask you to play your music. That is self-centered. So, build friendships. That is probably the number one thing. And recovery isn't just about avoiding drugs, alcohol, eating disorders. It's about building a life worth protecting. When you have built a life in sobriety, protect it with everything you've got, because it could be gone in a twinkle of an eye, like that. All you have to do is pick up a substance and you'll be gone again. That's what I have about long-term sobriety. It is there for any of us. What do you consider long-term sobriety? Are you in long-term sobriety?